She doesn't crave attention, promises, or intensity without depth. A Sigma female walks away the moment love feels partial, conditional, or quietly draining. A Sigma female understands something most people learn too late. Love that arrives in fragments slowly teaches you to shrink. Half love doesn't break you all at once, it erodes you in subtle ways, through hesitation disguised as patience, through inconsistency mistaken for mystery, through affection that shows up only when it's convenient for the other person. She notices these patterns early, not because she's paranoid, but because she's observant. She listens to energy more than words. Anyone can say they care, anyone can promise effort, but a Sigma female pays attention to what remains when the excitement fades. She watches how someone treats her when she's not entertaining, not pleasing, not chasing, not proving her worth. And the moment she senses emotional rationing, she begins to detach internally long before she ever leaves physically. Half love often comes wrapped in charm. It sounds like potential. It feels like almost committed, almost consistent, almost emotionally available, and for many people, almost feels safer than nothing. But a Sigma female doesn't build her life around almost. She knows that staying in emotional limbo is more exhausting than walking alone with clarity. She doesn't need constant reassurance, but she does require emotional presence. She doesn't demand perfection, but she expects accountability, and she refuses to normalize confusion. If someone's actions force her to question her value, their intentions, or her place in their life, she recognizes that as misalignment, not a challenge. To fix, a Sigma female has spent time alone long enough to understand her own rhythm. She knows how peaceful solitude can be. That's why half love feels especially loud to her nervous system. Inconsistency disrupts her inner balance. Emotional unpredictability drains her focus. She doesn't romanticize chaos because she's already built stability within herself. This is why she doesn't beg for clarity. She watches, she observes, she allows people to reveal themselves naturally. And when they do, she believes them the first time. She doesn't stay hoping someone will grow into the version she imagined. She accepts who they are in the present and decides accordingly. Half love often expects patience without effort. It asks her to wait without direction, to invest without security, to give without receiving. And while she's capable of deep devotion, she's unwilling to self-abandon in the name of connection. She understands that love should expand her life, not constrict it. A Sigma female doesn't stay where she has to negotiate basic emotional needs. If she has to explain why respect matters, why consistency matters, why presence matters, she knows she's already too far inside something misaligned. She values relationships where understanding doesn't need translation. Many mistake her boundaries for coldness. In reality, her boundaries exist because she feels deeply, she loves intensely, and she knows that giving that depth to someone who offers only fragments would be a betrayal of herself. She has no interest in chasing affection. Chasing creates imbalance. It places one person in power and the other in pursuit. A Sigma female prefers mutual movement, mutual effort, mutual investment. If she senses she's carrying the emotional weight alone, she doesn't complain, she withdraws. Half love often thrives on ambiguity, on undefined labels, on blurred intentions, on emotional access without responsibility. And while some accept that arrangement out of fear of loss, a Sigma female sees it clearly for what it is, emotional convenience. She doesn't confuse attention with care. Someone can text daily and still be emotionally unavailable. Someone can offer compliments while avoiding vulnerability. Someone can show desire without offering stability. She understands these distinctions because she has observed them play out before. When she leaves, it's rarely impulsive. It's the result of accumulated awareness, of noticing patterns that don't change, of giving silent chances that go unrecognized, of realizing that her presence is being taken for granted rather than valued. A Sigma female doesn't announce her departure. She doesn't create scenes. She doesn't demand closure conversations filled with explanations. She simply reclaims her energy. She reduces access. She redirects her focus. And one day, she's gone. This quiet exit confuses those who assumed she'd always be there, those who thought her patience meant tolerance, those who mistook her silence for weakness. But her silence was observation, her patience was discernment, and her departure is self-respect. She doesn't regret leaving half love behind. Relief replaces longing, peace replaces anxiety, clarity replaces confusion. Because she knows that loneliness inside a relationship is far heavier than solitude chosen freely. A Sigma female doesn't fear starting over. She fears staying too long where she's unseen. She understands that love should feel grounding, not destabilizing. It should feel safe, not uncertain, nourishing, not depleting. This is why she doesn't settle, not because she believes she's superior, but because she believes her emotional world deserves integrity. She has learned that accepting less teaches others how to treat her. And she refuses to participate in relationships that require her to lower her standards to keep someone comfortable. Half-love often reveals itself through excuses. I'm busy. I'm not ready. This is just how I am. A Sigma female hears these statements and doesn't argue with them. She takes them as information, and she adjusts her expectations, usually by removing herself from the equation. She knows that someone who wants to show up will find a way. Someone who values her presence will protect it. Someone who respects her heart won't gamble with it. Her independence isn't a defense mechanism. It's a lifestyle she cultivated intentionally. She knows how to meet her own needs. She knows how to create joy without external validation. And because of that, she isn't desperate for connection. She's selective. Half-love relies on dependency, on fear, on the idea that something is better than nothing. But a Sigma female knows that something that drains her is worse than nothing at all. She chooses depth over duration, meaning over attachment, alignment over chemistry. She doesn't confuse intensity with intimacy. She understands that true connection feels steady, not volatile. When she commits fully, but she only offers that commitment where it's met with equal presence, equal effort, equal respect. She refuses to pour into spaces where her energy disappears without return. This is why her love feels rare, because it is, and she knows its value too well to offer it halfway or accept it halfway. In return, she walks away not because she lacks patience, but because she has clarity. Not because she fears intimacy, but because she refuses emotional imbalance. Not because she's cold, but because she's conscious. And once she leaves half-love behind, she doesn't look back, not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with understanding. She understands that some people can only love at the level they've healed. And she chooses not to stay where that level falls short of what she requires to thrive. Her standard isn't perfection. Her standard is wholeness, and anything less than that will never be enough for a Sigma female. A Sigma female also understands that half-love often disguises itself as effort. It shows up sporadically, just enough to keep hope alive, a message at the right moment, a sudden gesture after distance, a brief surge of attention when she begins to pull away. Many mistake this for growth. She recognizes it as maintenance, just enough energy to prevent loss, never enough to build security. She doesn't fall for emotional breadcrumbs. She's already lived the cycle where inconsistency is mistaken for progress, where rare moments of closeness are used to justify long stretches of absence. She knows that real effort doesn't arrive in waves. It's steady, predictable, grounded, and when that steadiness is missing, she doesn't rationalize it away. Half-love often demands emotional flexibility from her but offers none in return. It expects her to understand moods, schedules, wounds, fears, and limitations while her own needs are postponed indefinitely. She sees how this dynamic quietly trains her to minimize herself, to become more accommodating, more patient, more silent, and she refuses to let love turn into self-erasure. A Sigma female values reciprocity on an energetic level, not scorekeeping, not transactional affection, but balance. She notices who initiates, who follows through, who remembers, who adjusts, who makes space, and when she feels like she's always the one bending, she recognizes the imbalance immediately. She doesn't confuse chemistry with compatibility. Intense attraction can exist without emotional safety. Passion can thrive in dysfunction. She's experienced enough to know that butterflies often come from unpredictability, not alignment, and she chooses calm connection over emotional spikes that leave her depleted. Half-love frequently avoids depth. It stays on the surface. It keeps conversations light. It dodges vulnerability. It deflects serious discussions. And while some interpret this as going with the flow, a Sigma female sees avoidance. She understands that intimacy requires courage, not just charm. She doesn't chase emotional openness out of people. She doesn't beg someone to communicate. She doesn't pressure anyone to commit. If someone isn't ready, willing, or capable, she respects that reality and removes herself. She believes that forcing connection only creates resentment and imbalance. A Sigma female trusts patterns over promises. She notices what someone does consistently, not what they say during emotional peaks. She watches how they show up during inconvenience, conflict, and calm, not just excitement, and if their presence disappears. When things become real, she doesn't wait for them to return. She also understands that half-love thrives on ambiguity because ambiguity benefits the one offering less. Undefined relationships allow access without accountability, emotional closeness without commitment, support without responsibility. She refuses these arrangements because she knows clarity protects both people and ambiguity usually protects only one. Her self-worth isn't tied to being chosen. It's rooted in knowing who she is when no one is watching. She doesn't measure her value by how intensely someone desires her. She measures it by how peacefully she exists within herself, and that peace becomes non-negotiable. Half-love often tries to guilt her into staying. It frames her standards as too high, her boundaries as walls, her independence as intimidating. She doesn't internalize these projections. She understands that people who benefit from low standards will always criticize those who refuse to lower them. She has learned that love should not require emotional endurance. It shouldn't feel like waiting, guessing, decoding, or hoping. It shouldn't demand silence to keep the peace. It shouldn't require shrinking expectations to maintain connection. A Sigma female doesn't seek completion through another person. She already feels whole. Love, to her, is an addition, not a solution. That's why she doesn't cling. She doesn't bargain. She doesn't stay attached to potential. She chooses what is present, available, and consistent. She also understands that leaving half-love doesn't mean she didn't care. It often means she cared deeply enough to protect herself before resentment replaced affection. She leaves while respect is still intact, while dignity remains, while she can walk away without bitterness. This emotional discipline is misunderstood by those who operate from attachment wounds. They see her departure as sudden, cold, unfair, but they didn't notice the silent moments where she waited, the internal conversations where she tried to understand, the observations she made without complaint. A Sigma female doesn't announce dissatisfaction immediately. She first watches to see if awareness exists naturally, if effort adjusts without instruction, if care deepens without demand. When none of that happens, she accepts the truth quietly. She knows that teaching someone how to love her usually results in disappointment, not because guidance is wrong, but because genuine desire doesn't need constant direction. Someone who values her will be curious about her needs without being pushed. Half-love also often resents her emotional self-sufficiency. Because she doesn't beg, it removes leverage. Because she can walk away, it exposes imbalance. Because she doesn't collapse without attention, it reveals that connection is optional for her, not survival. She doesn't threaten to leave, she simply knows she can, and that knowledge changes how she moves. She gives freely but not blindly. She invests but not recklessly. She opens but not without discernment. A Sigma female is deeply aware of emotional energy. She feels when conversations feel forced, when effort feels obligatory, when affection feels conditional, and she doesn't argue with those sensations. She trusts them. She also understands that half-love often stems from unresolved wounds, from fear of vulnerability, from emotional immaturity, from past disappointments. She has compassion for these realities, but she doesn't sacrifice herself to heal someone else. She knows that empathy without boundaries leads to self-betrayal, and she refuses to turn her understanding into an excuse to stay where she's unmet. Her independence allows her to leave without panic, without scrambling to replace what she lost, without rushing into distractions. She sits with the absence, she processes it, she integrates the lesson, and she moves forward clearer than before. Half-love often hopes she'll stay because she's patient, quiet, and low drama. It assumes her strength means endurance. It assumes her calm means acceptance. It assumes her loyalty means permanence, and that assumption is its greatest mistake, because when a Sigma female decides to leave, the decision is already complete internally. There's no back and forth, no testing, no return. Her energy has already disengaged. She doesn't block with anger. She doesn't seek revenge. She simply closes access, and that absence is permanent. She understands that love isn't proven through suffering. It's proven through consistency, through safety, through mutual care, and she refuses to romanticize struggle as depth. Her standards come from experience, not fantasy, from knowing how it feels to give fully and receive partially, from knowing the cost of staying too long, from knowing the relief of choosing herself. This is why half-love never lasts with her, not because she's difficult, but because she's awake, awake to emotional truth, awake to her own worth, awake to the quiet ways love either nourishes or drains the soul. And once she's awake, she never goes back to sleep for anyone. A Sigma female also recognizes how half-love subtly distorts time. It keeps the future vague while borrowing endlessly from the present. Plans are postponed. Conversations about direction are delayed. Commitment is treated like pressure rather than intention. She notices how months pass without clarity, how progress is always promised but never embodied, and she understands that time without direction is not patience, it's stagnation. She values intentionality, not grand gestures, not dramatic declarations, but quiet alignment between words and actions. She pays attention to follow-through, to reliability, to whether someone's presence feels anchored or temporary. Half-love feels temporary even when it claims permanence, and that internal contradiction is something she cannot ignore. A Sigma female doesn't need control in relationships. She needs trust, and trust isn't built through intensity or exclusivity alone. It's built through emotional availability, consistency, and accountability. When those elements are missing, attraction fades quickly for her, no matter how strong the initial connection was. She also understands that half-love often thrives in power imbalance. One person is always slightly more invested, slightly more hopeful, slightly more accommodating, and the other benefits from that asymmetry. She refuses to occupy the role of the one who waits, wonders, or adapts endlessly. Equality matters to her emotionally, mentally, energetically. She doesn't equate sacrifice with love. She's seen how sacrifice without reciprocity turns into resentment. She's watched people give until they disappear inside relationships. She refuses to confuse loyalty with self-neglect. To her, real love strengthens identity rather than dissolving it. A Sigma female is deeply aware of her inner state. She notices when her intuition feels uneasy, when her thoughts become preoccupied, when her mood shifts based on someone else's availability. Those signals matter to her. She listens to them before they turn into emotional exhaustion. Half-love often asks her to tolerate uncertainty as a baseline, to normalize inconsistency, to accept emotional unpredictability as part of the connection. She doesn't adapt to environments that destabilize her nervous system. She chooses peace over attachment, even when attachment feels tempting. She also understands that attraction can exist without alignment. Desire can pull people together who are fundamentally incompatible in how they love, communicate, or commit. She doesn't force alignment where it doesn't exist. She lets mismatches reveal themselves. Without resistance, a Sigma female doesn't need to be chased, but she does need to feel chosen, not occasionally, not conditionally, but consistently. She doesn't compete for attention. She doesn't try to prove her worth. If someone hesitates to choose her fully, she removes herself from the competition entirely. She is comfortable with emotional depth, but she doesn't confuse emotional intensity with intimacy. Deep conversations mean nothing without emotional responsibility, vulnerability. Without consistency feels empty to her. She looks for integration where emotional openness is matched by emotional reliability. Half-love often enjoys access to her insight, empathy, and presence without offering stability in return. She notices when she becomes a source of comfort, clarity, or emotional grounding for someone who remains distant, detached, or undefined, and she withdraws before that dynamic becomes exploitative. She doesn't see relationships as projects to manage or people as puzzles to solve. She doesn't stay to fix emotional unavailability. She doesn't take on the role of healer, teacher, or emotional regulator. She believes adults are responsible for their own growth. A Sigma female understands that compatibility is revealed over time, not imagined at the beginning. She lets reality unfold. She doesn't rush attachment. She doesn't invest prematurely. And when reality shows limitations, she accepts them without denial. Half-love often hopes she'll adjust her expectations to match someone else's capacity. She doesn't. She adjusts her proximity instead. Distance becomes her boundary when words fail to translate understanding. She also knows that emotional availability is a choice. Busy lives don't prevent connection, priorities do. She notices where she ranks without needing reassurance, and when she senses she's an option rather than a priority, she quietly steps away. A Sigma female doesn't fear missing out on potential love. She fears missing herself, missing her peace, missing her clarity, missing the life she's intentionally building. That fear keeps her grounded in discernment. She doesn't dramatize endings. She integrates them. She learns. She recalibrates. And she moves forward without carrying emotional residue from connections that didn't meet her fully. She doesn't allow past half-love to shape future expectations. Negatively, it sharpens them. She also understands that being selective reduces chaos, fewer connections, deeper alignment, fewer attachments, greater clarity. She prefers quality over quantity in every area of her life, especially love. Half-love often relies on emotional ambiguity to maintain control. She dismantles that by refusing to participate in confusion. She asks herself one simple question: does this connection feel nourishing or draining? And she trusts the answer. She doesn't punish people for being unable to love fully. She simply removes herself from spaces where she would have to compromise her emotional integrity. She understands that not everyone is capable of depth, consistency, or commitment, and that's not personal. A Sigma female's strength lies in emotional restraint, not suppression but regulation. She feels deeply without being ruled by emotion. She makes decisions based on alignment rather than longing, and that discipline protects her from staying in half-fulfilled bonds. She also recognizes that half-love often resurfaces after separation, in the form of sudden clarity, renewed effort, temporary presence. She doesn't mistake this for transformation. She watches for sustained change over time and rarely finds it. She doesn't reopen doors out of nostalgia. She doesn't revisit connections out of loneliness. Once she's seen a pattern clearly, she doesn't unsee it. Awareness becomes irreversible. A Sigma female understands that love should support her growth, not distract from it. If a connection pulls her away from her goals, her focus, or her sense of self, she sees that as misalignment. Love, to her, should feel expansive, not consuming. She doesn't need constant validation. She needs emotional honesty. She doesn't need intensity. She needs stability. She doesn't need promises. She needs presence. These priorities shape every decision she makes in relationships. Half-love often tries to reframe her boundaries as rigidity. She knows the difference between rigidity and self-respect. Boundaries are not walls, they're filters. They allow the right energy in and keep misalignment out. She also understands that leaving half-love creates space for full love. Not immediately, not magically, but energetically. She clears room for alignment by refusing to stay attached to what falls short. She doesn't rush to replace what she walked away from. She lets absence teach her. She allows stillness to recalibrate her nervous system. She reconnects with herself before opening again. A Sigma female's love is calm, intentional, and deeply present. It doesn't beg. It doesn't perform. It doesn't compete. And because of that, it requires an equal level of maturity to receive. This is why half-love never survives in her world. It cannot coexist with clarity. It cannot thrive where discernment exists. It dissolves the moment she chooses self-respect over attachment. She doesn't desettle because settling would mean betraying the version of herself she worked hard to become. The woman who learned to stand alone, to trust her intuition, to value her peace, to honor her emotional depth. And so she walks forward, not hardened, not closed, but precise, open to love that is whole, grounded, intentional, mutual. Anything less simply cannot stay, because a Sigma female doesn't ask for half-love. She lives in a way that makes it impossible to accept it.